This video is brought to you by mybookie.ag. We have an excellent fight night card coming up this Saturday. The main card is going to be happening at 7 p.m. Eastern, which is roughly like 3 hours before the usual time a pay-per-view card happens. And there are a ton of good fights throughout the whole thing. A few canceled fights like Brandon Royval versus Amir Albazi and Elber Duraev versus Mikhail Alexiouchuk. But they are starting the prelims pretty strong with David Vorak versus Manel Kep. That's an excellent fight. Brian Battle taking a short turnaround up against, man, that name is hard to pronounce, Rinat Faredinov. We're going to see if Battle has the kind of wrestling defense in order to get by this, because I do believe he is the better striker, or at least the more technical striker. Rinat is a bit wild with his hands sometimes. Rafa Garcia versus Mahashate is going to be an excellent fight. Said Nurmagomedov versus Saiyokub Karamanov. That is one of the better fights on the card in my opinion. Two good wrestlers, but I do believe that Said is the better overall striker, which might make the difference of the fight. Jake Matthews is on the card. He's looking way better than ever before, coming up to welterweight. Then we got a banger in Drew Dober versus Bobby Green, one of the best fights on the whole card in my opinion. Two veterans who have been around for a long time, and I'm surprised they've never fought each other yet. And honestly, these are two fighters that, regardless of where they're ranked, regardless of where they go in their careers, they always put on a show, and we're always looking forward to their fights. Bruce Leroy versus Julian Erosa is an excellent fight as well. And then, of course, the co-main event, Arman Tsarukyan versus Damir Ismagulov, is, in my opinion, the best fight on the whole card. It's the true main event for me. It's the most technical fight, the most skilled fight, and honestly, I would have to say they are the two best fighters on the whole card. And then the main event is going to be an interesting one. Power versus volume, both technical in their own right, but I think it's a fairly easy fight to understand of how they're going to approach it, and how each of them would win the fight. The prospect of the night, I'll have to say, is Karamanov, who is fighting Said Nurmagomedov. At 27 years old, this is going to be his third fight in the UFC, and so far he's performing well, using his wrestling as his advantage, and the guy is truly hard to keep off when he gets a hold of you. I'll have to say there is no real fighter of the night. It could be really bounced around between the two guys in the main event, Arman Tsarukyan, Damir, but definitely the banger of the night is Drew Dober versus Bobby Green. This one is going to be super explosive. They are both always in exciting fights, and pretty sure this fight is not going to hit the ground unless Bobby wants to take it that way, but we know his latest stance on wrestling. Not a true fan of it. The fight of the night is Arman Tsarukyan versus Damir Ismagulov, and you're definitely going to see a lot of wrestling in this one, at least from Arman's side. They're both very technical on the feet, very technical on the ground, and it's a great representation of where the lightweight division is going. This is a fight that's going to show you pretty much what the future is looking like in this lightweight division. If guys who are like at the bottom of the top 15 are fighting at their level, lightweight may absolutely be the most skilled weight class in the world. And then finally, the stake of the night. The only fighter I have to say is in hot waters is Deron Winn. He is not performing that well ever since he came into the UFC. So far, he's 2-3, and both the guys that he beat are not in the UFC anymore, and 2 of his 3 losses have been by finish, especially that last one against Phil Haas. He took a beating, man. So if he loses this one, and it would most likely be by some kind of knockout, because Julian Marquez is super aggressive with his striking, very reckless in his attempts, it could be the end of Deron Winn in the UFC. But ultimately, let's go right into that co-main event. Arman Tsarukyan versus Damir Ismagulov. This is the fight I'm most looking forward to on the card by far. There's no fight on this card that excites me more than this one. So both guys are very well-rounded in everything, right? They both have great kicks, good boxing, good wrestling, good Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, good sambo skills, excellent footwork, great angles when they throw strikes. Arman has more of a wrestling style than Damir does. Damir is more of a boxer than Arman is. Arman also throws a lot more kicks, especially that lead high kick is one of his best weapons. Left hooks, right overhands, lead high kicks, those are the main strikes that he throws. And he expends a lot of energy into these kind of strikes, man. Almost everything he throws on the feet is to hurt you. Actually, it's very interesting because sometimes when he throws up the lead high kick, he takes off a lot of the power. But when he throws his hands, it's almost all power at all times. So it's an interesting kind of formula that he has there. And you'll see combinations out of him like lead high kicks into double legs. Crazy stuff like that, which requires a lot of energy from him. Damir Ismagulov, on the other hand, also has a very good lead kick. But with that goes one of the most efficient lead hands in the UFC. He beats his opponent with his jab and left hook alone. That's all he needs at times in order to win rounds against you. It's so fast and so tight, it's hard to see coming, and because of that, he's able to stick that jab on opponents at all times. He also has a great understanding of footwork, and his defense in general from strikes is excellent, and you saw that in his last fight against Guram. Guram is an excellent kickboxer who actually comes from professional kickboxing, and he had a hard time landing clean shots in Ismagulov. Ismagulov was doing a great job of pulling on all the punches and sliding away from all the kicks, countering with his left hook afterward. And that's where I can see a bit of an issue for Arman in this fight. The fact that he extends and commits so much, there's going to be a big difference in energy efficiency. Damir is always efficient with everything. His commitment into strikes, what he throws and when he throws it, whereas Arman doesn't really have that. Arman will try to force an opening on you and force a knockout, where Damir will never do that. Damir will try to hurt you with his jab or left hook enough to where then he'll try to snipe you with his right hand, which is, I would have to say, a bit sloppier than his left hand. His right hand is not generally as sharp as his left hand is, which makes me think, is he actually left-handed as an orthodox fighter? Because he doesn't really throw a right kick as much either. It's a lot of left kicks and left hands, and they are a lot more clean than his right side. And I could see where he's jabbing Arman the whole fight. Arman's not going to be able to get away from it unless he shoots takedowns, and from there, can Damir wrestle with Arman? That's the biggest question going into the fight. If Arman shoots takedowns to get inside that lead hand, will it be enough to create some kind of scramble or even just blast through Damir and get him to the ground? Damir seems to be the bigger man. That's the most interesting thing about the fight in my opinion. It's kind of what everything rides on for Arman's chances to win here. If he can get Damir to the ground, I think Arman might actually win the fight. If he gets his takedown stuffed, especially in the first round, I could definitely see where Damir wins this fight. Arman's chances on the feet is trying to find some big right overhand or big left hook out of nowhere and catch Damir slipping. But other than that, like the lead high kick against such a taller opponent is theoretically going to be very hard for him to land, especially with the way Damir moves. Damir will slide away from your kicks, and he always has that right hand up to his head. Look at all of Damir's fights. He always keeps that right hand up tight, and his left hand is always probing out there at long range. That kind of stance can invite a single leg takedown from Arman, and that's where everything kind of gets thrown into question here. Because Damir isn't really defending many takedowns. Not a lot of guys are shooting on him, so it's really an unknown about his game if he can wrestle at this level. Because Arman Tsarukyan is the kind of guy who can wrestle with the likes of Islam Makhachev. It makes it very hard to predict, but if I'm going to pick someone, I'm going to make it interesting. It can go either way. I'm going to preface with that. There really isn't a bad pick here, but I'm going to go with the underdog, as Arman is a pretty big favorite against Damir, and I like Damir's chances, especially with those odds. I'm going to go Damir Ismagulov. I think his jab from a distance and left hook counter, as Arman is exploding in there, are going to be landing the entire fight, and potentially even high kicks here and there. There is something to mention that Arman is consistently fighting really skilled fighters, but that could do one or two things. It could kind of break him, where he's not ready to keep going up against these guys, or he's learning after every single one of these fights. He's going to get so much better over time. It's really hard to know right now. But ultimately, with all the unknowns, I'm going to go with Damir Ismagulov, and I'm going to go by a decision win. And then we go to the main event. Jared Cannonier versus Sean Strickland. Two fighters who are extremely efficient in what they do. Even though Strickland has a lot more output than Jared, they both land fairly often. I will have to say that Strickland definitely throws more strikes than he should sometimes. But when Jared Cannonier is throwing, he is landing, and most of the strikes that he throws are an attempt to knock you out. So that there is a bit scary, and that's the big difference between the two fighters, the power difference. Strickland doesn't really have that much power, and Cannonier has probably the most power in the whole division. If he hits Strickland once, the fight could be over. And remember, Strickland's coming off a 2-punch knockout from Alex Pereira, and that fight was 5 months ago. So factor in also that Strickland was in training camp maybe for a month or 2 months, sparring most likely. We've seen even videos of him sparring. He probably didn't let his brain rest for 3 to 4 months. And is that enough? Is that enough rest for his brain? I don't think so, to be honest, because he got knocked unconscious. So with that going into the fight as well, if Cannonier lands on something powerful, Strickland could be in trouble at any moment in the fight. And Cannonier just has to be perfect one time. And I think this fight is going to be a great example of that, because I could definitely see where Strickland is landing a bunch of strikes, jabs, some leg kicks here and there, but mostly jabs and right crosses and some left hooks around the guard, as he's trying to overwhelm Cannonier's defense. But as you know from Cannonier, the guy's a sniper. He crushes you when he finds that opening, and he can kind of lull you into a slow fight. So I could definitely see a situation where Strickland is landing a lot of jabs on Cannonier, trying to punch through his guard and stuff, and then while he's extending these punches, Cannonier counters him and cracks him with a hook. And the clinch is definitely going to favor Cannonier as well. The elbows in there, just like you saw against Derek Brunson. The guy is ruthless when he gets in close on you. And the leg kicks. This is a fight that could absolutely end with leg kicks as well. Strickland has some of the worst leg kicking defense in UFC history, and that is statistically proven. He has about a 20% leg kicking defense, and Jared Cannonier is one of the biggest leg kickers in the middleweight division. He injured Anderson Silva's leg by kicking it in the inside, and it was not the leg that Anderson broke against Chris Weidman, it was the other leg. You saw some big leg kicks from him when he fought Israel Adesanya and many other fighters like Jack Hermanson, etc. Sean Strickland is not going to be defending those leg kicks, and if he's not going to stop the leg kicks from Cannonier, the fight is going to probably end very quick. Not only will the kicks to the legs cause a lot of damage, but it's going to slow him down and keep Strickland in line of sight for Cannonier's punches. And as we know from Cannonier, because he doesn't really put on a crazy pace, he doesn't gas out in fights that much. So ultimately, my prediction for this fight, I'm going to go with Jared Cannonier. I'm going to go by a third round knockout, as I see Strickland landing a lot of strikes out there, extending a lot of punches, but with the amount of offense he puts forward, it's also going to create a lot of openings for Cannonier to counter. Combine that with leg kicks from a distance, and if they ever get in close, Cannonier's elbows are going to be alive there and really change the fight for him. I see eventually Cannonier finding that opening for the counter and landing a big one on Strickland. And if you look at those odds, man, Cannonier and Sean Strickland's almost an even fight, almost a pick'em, but I definitely see Cannonier's chances being much better than people are giving it, especially with the fact that he has a spot to exploit. Strickland doesn't really defend leg kicks at all. Just off that alone, Cannonier has a great opportunity to land his shots, even win on rounds because of that, and especially find a knockout. It would be a completely different story if Strickland defended leg kicks well, but the fact that it's almost non-existent is a bit concerning for him. And the best place to go where you'll find these odds is mybookie.ag, and this is a place you could definitely capitalize. Not only by picking the fighter that you think is going to win, but even if you want to go to the props here. For an example, if you want to go with Jared Cannonier winning by a knockout, that's a plus 255. It's actually interesting because it's not too far off from Sean Strickland's chances of winning by knockout, which is plus 330. A guy who necessarily doesn't have that much power is almost given the same kind of chance of winning by knockout as Cannonier, which is crazy. And of course, a big reason why I'm riding with Damir Ismagulov is for how big of an underdog he actually is. He's almost a 2-1 underdog against Arman, and that fight is too highly skilled to have one or the other as that big of an underdog. A fighter that a lot of people seem to overlook is Alex Caceres. I think because of the notion that he fought at bantamweight for a while, a lot of people don't think that he's ready to fight these bigger 145ers, but the guy beat Song Woo Choi, who's even bigger than Julian Erosa. I do think Julian Erosa will win because of his volume and long range, also the fact that Caceres doesn't really have that much power in comparison to the guys Erosa has fought before. I do think it's fairly easy though to overlook someone like Bruce Leroy. I would not be surprised at all if he can pull something off, but I am riding with Julian Erosa. It's a fight to really keep your eye on though. And that pick'em fight, Nurmagomedov versus Karamanov, that fight can honestly go either way. I agree with the pick'em, but I ultimately do think that Saeed's striking advantage should make a difference. I am pretty surprised that Brian Battle is an underdog against Rinat, considering that Brian Battle is looking a lot better in every single one of his fights, and Rinat is fairly new, hasn't really fought high-level competition compared to what Battle has been fighting, so it should be an interesting one. But your dogs of the card, I would have to say, are both Jared Cannonier and Damir Ismagulov. If an underdog is going to win, it's probably one of them two. Mahashate is a guy that you could look forward to as well. He has great striking, and the way I could see Garcia pulling it off is if he gets it to the ground, but standing with Mahashate is a dangerous approach. And in my opinion, your locks of the card, the fighters that are most likely going to win, and Sergey Morozov, Cheyenne Vlismas, and I might even throw in Jared Cannonier in there as well. And if you want to capitalize on these bets, capitalize on the odds, make sure to go to mybookie.ag and sign up for the deposit bonus, where the first time you sign up, they'll match your deposit whatever you put in there. So if you put in like 20 bucks, they'll give you another 20. That is all the way up to $1,000. And all you have to do is use the promo code WEASEL to activate this offer. That's promo code WEASLE, so you can take advantage of MyBookie's sign up offer. And remember to visit mybookie.ag today, because the lines are moving quick and you could definitely win big. That is ultimately the end of the predictions, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and if you did, make sure to give this a like, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.